Somewhere in a UN meeting room, diplomats have spent over a decade arguing about a specific kind of weapon. One that can find a human target, decide it's a threat, and fire, without a person approving that specific decision in real time. Most people assume that weapon is still theoretical. According to a UN panel investigation, a version of it may have already been used on an actual battlefield years ago. Here's the part that surprises most people. Militaries have been building systems that operate faster than human decision-making for decades, just not in the offensive role most people imagine first. Air defense systems like the U.S. Navy's Aegis combat system, the Phalanx close-in weapon system, and Israel's Iron Dome have operated in modes capable of automatically detecting, tracking, and engaging incoming threats, like missiles or rockets, without waiting for a human to approve each individual engagement. The justification has always been physics. An incoming missile can close the distance in seconds, sometimes in less time than it takes a human to consciously process what's happening and respond. These systems represent a real, decades-old precedent. When reaction time gets short enough, militaries have already accepted machine-speed decision-making in a defensive role, protecting against incoming threats rather than initiating an attack. The genuinely new development isn't machine-speed decisions. It's whether that same logic extends to offense, deciding to attack a human target, rather than defending against an incoming one. In March 2021, a UN panel of experts on Libya published a report describing an incident from the previous year's civil conflict. According to the panel, forces backed by Libya's UN-recognized government deployed a Turkish-made drone called the Kargu-2 against retreating fighters loyal to a rival faction. The report described the weapon as having a fire, forget, and find capability, able to locate and engage targets without requiring an active data connection back to a human operator. The report itself was notably cautious in its language, stating the systems were programmed to attack targets in this mode, without definitively confirming that the drone operated fully autonomously during this specific engagement or that any deaths resulted directly from it. Researchers who reviewed the incident afterward, including at King's College London, noted the report did not fully clarify whether the drone was operating autonomously or under manual control at the exact moment of the attack. Still, multiple outlets, including NPR, described it as potentially the first documented case of an autonomous weapon engaging human targets on a battlefield. 3 years later, a much larger, far more scrutinized case emerged in an active, ongoing conflict that remains genuinely contested. In April 2024, Plus 972 magazine and local call, Israeli-Palestinian news outlets, published an investigation based on interviews with 6 unnamed Israeli intelligence officers, describing an AI system used by the Israel Defense Forces called Lavender. According to that reporting, later covered by The Guardian and CNN, Lavender processed intelligence data to generate a list identifying tens of thousands of individuals in Gaza as suspected low-level militants, with sources describing minimal human review of the system's individual recommendations before strikes were authorized. The same reporting described a companion system called the Gospel, used to help identify physical structures as potential targets. The IDF's official response, provided to The Guardian and other outlets, explicitly disputed that characterization, stating that some of the claims portrayed in your questions are baseless in fact, while others reflect a flawed understanding of IDF directives and international law. The military described a process that it says keeps a human analyst directly in the loop, using these systems as one input among several in a broader, human-controlled targeting process, not as systems making unilateral decisions. This is a genuinely disputed, actively contested case, still being examined by legal scholars studying the laws of armed conflict. It is best understood exactly that way. Seriously reported by named journalists citing intelligence sources on one side, and directly and specifically disputed by the military institution involved on the other. Both of these cases sit inside a much larger and much more stalled international policy debate. Since 2014, diplomats have met under the UN's Convention on Certain Conventional Weapons to discuss regulating what are formally called lethal autonomous weapons systems, or laws. According to Human Rights Watch's tracking of these negotiations, dozens of countries have expressed support for moving towards some form of ban or binding restriction on fully autonomous weapons. That effort has repeatedly stalled because a small number of major military powers, notably including Russia and the United States, have consistently argued that formal regulation is premature, given how early this technology still is. Meanwhile, China, the United States, and Russia are all publicly investing in AI-enabled military technology for surveillance, targeting assistance, and autonomous or semi-autonomous drone and defense systems as part of a broader, openly acknowledged effort to avoid falling behind rival militaries on this capability. None of this is settled, hidden, or purely theoretical anymore. Machine-speed decision-making has been a normal part of military defense for decades. Whether that same logic should extend to offensive targeting decisions, made partly or fully by AI systems with limited or contested human oversight, is being actively decided right now, case by case, largely outside the kind of binding international agreement that exists for other categories of weapons. Not because nobody has raised the concern, but because the countries with the most advanced capabilities have specifically resisted settling the question while they are still building it. If this changes how you think about the phrase "human in the loop," that's exactly the right reaction to have. Subscribe for more deep dives into the parts of the AI story that don't get nearly enough public attention. And tell me in the comments, should there be a binding international ban on autonomous weapons, even if some countries refuse to sign it?